Welcome to our program on land back and climate justice in Marin with our special guests, Theresa and Jason. This is a program of the Climate Reality Project Bay Area Chapter, Climate Justice Team, Indigenous Voices Speaker Series. My name is Alma Soongi Beck. I am one of the 3 climate justice co-chairs of our Bay Area chapter. And I'm also here with Siri, who is another one of the climate justice co-chairs. We're really, really thrilled that you are interested and here to listen to our fabulous speakers talk about this really important topic on land back and climate justice. Theresa Harlan is founder and director of the Alliance for Felix Cove. And Jason Deschler is the dance captain and headman for Coast Miwok of Marin Tribal Council. Teresa's going to speak first, and let me just talk a little bit about the context of this program. We, on the climate justice team at the Climate Reality Bay Area chapter, we've had a climate justice team for almost 3 years, and we started the Indigenous Voices Project as a way for us to wrap our minds as a chapter around backing and thinking about Indigenous voices and Indigenous sovereignty in the context of climate and climate justice work. There are 3 questions that we came up with in conjunction with our speakers around today's program. And these are the 3 questions. The first one is, what do American environmentalism, preservation, and conservation look like from your Native perspective? What do ongoing settler colonization, national parks, and the concept of wilderness have to do with the climate crisis? And thirdly, why are rematriation, land back, Indigenous science, and Indigenous land care practices such as cultural burning and understanding humans as relatives to animal and plant life key to addressing the climate crisis? So on that note, Theresa, please take it away.
Oh, apantoish. Goatsi hopa for my Carrie's relatives and from my husband's family, Inksche, and happy to be here with all of you relatives tonight. Thank you for this opportunity to be part of the Indigenous Voices series. And I just want to thank Siri and Alma and Kevin for being there and helping us develop tonight's program and coaching us along. But I'm going to start off with a video. So I'm going to share my screen.
We share that love with this land, and we had so many relatives, the deer, the birds, millions of birds, fish. It was so beautiful. What they did to this land is not right. We need to learn about our history together and face it.
So that's the voice of my cousin, Dave Carrillo. And he was so right in that we need to face the truth. And what was done to the land wasn't right. I just came back from an Indigenous conference with an emphasis on climate change. And one of the sisters from Maori's sister, she was speaking and she said, we're in a crisis of relationship, not a climate crisis. And that hit me as being so true, because if we were in relationship with our Mother Earth, our home, that was respectful, relational, reciprocal, generous, we would not be in the state that we are with global warming, weather events, catastrophic weather events, ocean acidification. We would be in a world that is nurturing and loving and tending. I mean, we came here with the assistance of animals and insects and other beings, and so we need to show that We need to return that reciprocity of gratitude to our mother. And so I'm firmly in belief that this is our way forward. This photograph that I'm sharing is our family's home from the 1940s on what was called Laird's Landing. But we've started our first rematriation by calling it Felix Cove after our family name Felix. And so the house that you see on my left side of the screen was built by my mother's grandpa, Ben Felix, or Joseph Felix, and his brother, Ben Felix. So archaeological records tell us that Coast Miwok people were on the peninsula for at least 12,000 years. So that's 12,000 years of indigenous science. That's 12,000 years of observation and practice, and something that cannot be reduced to mythology. We know Spanish missions, Mexican ranchos, and American tenant ranching system and the commercial ranches that are there were all part of the colonial erasure of Coast Miwok or Tamalco people existence. They're the creators, they're the stakeholders of that erasure. We know that California laws, right after statehood, the legislature passed the Act for the Government and Protection of Indians, which was the legalized slavery of Native children as early as the age of 3. And they were not released until for women in their 18, men in their 20s. They amended the law in 1860 to remove the parental consent. And I would presume that the 1850 consent was forced consent. So it was allowed the legal slavery murder of people. We know that Tamalco people survived by their labor and their intimate knowledge of their land. But with colonization, they were reduced to tenants living in their own homelands. They were pushed to the margins, food sources and economies disrupted by cattle ranching. The missions brought in cattle, Mexican ranchos, American ranches continue, cattle grazing on the peninsula, which devastated the natural grasses, the natural practice of tending to the land and the waters. And so our family at Felix Cove was just one of many Tamalco families that lived on the east and the west shores of Tamales Bay. But our home's the last remaining home built by Tamalco hands. When you go to Point Reyes National Seashore, you're told about the story of Drake greeted by Coast Miwok people. But what you're not told is the story of violence and the expulsion of Coast Miwok Tamalco people from the Western Shores. So with the tenant ranching in the 1860s, one of the ranchers had his ranch foreman, Henrik Clausen, drive people off the shore. And what's so pernicious is that Clausen used the school census to identify and locate the families living on the Western Shore. And this story was told to C. Hart Merriam, the ethnologist. So they're almost bragging in this quotation that saying that, he sent his man to evict them. They went there, they tore down the homes while one of the rancher's men stood ready with a gun to punish any Indian who might resent the destruction of his home. And then, as a result, most of the Indians crossed the bay and scattered and soon became practically extinct, except for a few half-breeds on the west side near Marshall. So our family home is directly across from Marshall on the west side. So I think it's safe to assume that the Felix family were one of the half-breeds that were left to live on the Western Shores. So I was asked the question, what do American environmentalism, preservation, and conservation look like from my perspective? This is a photograph of President Kennedy signing the legislation that established Point Reyes National Seashore. These are the men who were part of that work to establish the park. So when I'm told by environmentalists that indigenous science is not a science and more of a religious belief, this is what I see. When I'm told by white environmentalists that Native people had contributed to the extinction of certain animals or the destruction of certain landways, this is what I see. When I'm told that Native people are not equipped or should not be given land back for their own tending, for their nurturing, and for sustainable foodways, this is what I see. National parks are indigenous homelands. This is a photograph of my grandmother, Bertha Felix Campili, at Felix Cove. You can see the bay behind her, Tamales Bay, which we learned is the name is Tamaliwa. So preservation and conservation are words of exclusion for me as a Native person. We know from history that preservation began with wealthy families wanting to escape the overcrowding of the cities in the East. And so they bought big tracts of land, and the men wanted to go there to hunt. And we know that early conservation laws prohibited local people from hunting the animals that the wealthy, privileged families wanted to save for themselves. We know that the establishment of national parks was built on the expulsion of Native people from their homelands, and that the lands were saved for others, for the recreation and the pleasure of others and their future generations, but not us as Native people. So as Indigenous families, we are dependent on going to the park to request a special use permit if we want to go to Felix Cove and hold an event, a gathering. We submit a permit request. So shortly after my grandmother's passing, the owners of K Ranch, which was the neighboring ranch, sent my uncle Victor Souza eviction papers. My uncle and my grandpa were still living at the house. And my uncle fought it in court. The district attorney of Marin County at the time, William Wysick, took the case on as pro bono. And they fought it in court. They lost. They appealed the decision, and they lost that decision. And so this is why the descendants of Bertha and her sister, Perfecta, sisters who were the matriarchs of the Felix family, that's why we're no longer there at Tamales Bay. However, we're returning 60 plus years after this eviction. We're returning to rekindle and reconnect our ancestral relationship to the Cove and to Tamaliwa. And so this is our work. Here you see this photograph labeled 2022. When we return to our home, we bring photographs, family photographs, we bring flowers, we bring food, we bring laughter, we bring prayer, we bring song. You know, we're answering the call of our ancestors who are there. And it's, you know, when I would go down to the Cove, it would feel so lonely. It would feel like we had abandoned our ancestors. And so this is what was the driving force behind the creation of the Alliance and our talks with the National Park Service to regain access to our home. The upper right corner on my corner is, you can see the evidence of tagging and vandalism. After this picture was taken, someone tried to break in and broke some of the boards. And then the lower black and white photo is of how the home looked in the 1940s. It was well established. There's fencing. It was a home. So, we've built the Alliance for Felix Cove. It's an Indigenous women-led organization. Our leadership circle is called the Strawberry Sisters because strawberry was my mom's favorite food to harvest when she was growing up. And we're built on these principles of relationship, generosity, respect, reciprocity, responsibility, and gratitude. We really wanted to build an organization that was Indigenous centered, and we didn't want to follow a Western model of a nonprofit organization. So I'm really thankful for the sisters for joining me in this fight to rematriate our home, to call attention to the need to look at national parks as ancestral homelands. The work that we do is to advocate for our family to gain access to our home. I have elder cousins in their 70s and 80s who want to go inside the home of their mom and their uncles and their aunts, but we're locked out. One, because the interior floors are rotted, but there's no movement to fix it and allow us to go in. We're working to shift the narrative from the supplanting of our history to the prioritization and the celebration of white settler history. The historic ranches that are out there, is not the only history at Point Reyes National Seashore. We're building an engaging community. We built a tule canoe last summer and fall, and this summer we're launching an Indigenous youth kayak program to bring our relatives back on Tamales Bay. And we're advocating for Indigenous science and cultural practices as a way forward, as a way for a sustainable future. There's a few photographs of our workshops, bundling tule, our tule harvest, and making cordage. This was at China Camp Beach and Stafford Lake, where we harvested our tule. This is a photograph of Redbird Willie, our ancestral skills instructor. He led our workshops. The top right corner is a child's tule canoe that we built in one day. It was really a practice exercise before we got to the big tule canoe. And then the lower corner is our 16-foot tule canoe. We named her Tamaliwa, and we launched her at McNair's Beach in San Rafael. But before we did that, we took her home to Felix Cove, and we dipped her in the waters in her homeland. And our project was called Re-Indigenizing Tamaliwa, welcoming our relatives back to Tamales Bay. And the idea was to bring Native people in tule canoes, dugout canoes, plank canoes, kayaks, you name it, to fill the bay with water with our relatives. But we found that Tamales Bay is not accessible for large numbers of people. We wanted our celebration to be open and accessible to everyone. And so we found Marin County Parks to be our home site for our launch. And so, as we do our projects, our Alliance for Felix Cove, our family of community members, relatives, and volunteers, it grows larger and stronger. And it feeds our commitment to do our work, to protect, restore, rematriate Felix Cove, and to return to our ways of our ancestors, to face the trauma of cultural trauma, intergenerational trauma, structural trauma that left us with this distance, left us with not being able to learn the ways, directly from our family living at the Cove. So when I go and I visit the Cove and I stand on the beach and I look at the waters, I listen to the waves. I listen for the voices of our family from past days. Our family knew Tamaliwa well, knew to respect her and her ocean waters. Tamaliwa, such a beautiful name for an eternal water spirit. Tamaliwa, on each visit, speaks and fills me with dreams. Tamaliwa, I dream of my mom, dad, aunts, uncles, and the long line of beloved ancestors. Tamaliwa, I dream of a new generation knowing the taste of strawberries, huckleberries, and hazelnuts. Tamaliwa, Help us bring a new generation of voices paddling on tule canoes in your waters. And as the waves gently lap the shore, I hear her voice. Come back, come home. She nudges, she whispers. Show us you hear us. Show us you remember us. Show us you will come back. Come back. Kamolish, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Theresa. All right, Jason.
Opantoish, Ka'awe, Jason Deschler. How are you? Greetings. That's our slang. Greetings. It's asking how you feeling. My name is Jason Deschler. I'm the Miwok, part of the Miwok Tribal Council. I am preservation officer, cultural advisor when I'm working with the community. I'm headman of my family, and you could say captain, but I'm a fire keeper. I'm a keeper of traditions and stories that are passed down through our families, generations. My family was in Marshall. We're known as the Marshall Indians. We were there until the 60s, 1960s. We are Hukuiko. Huku meaning the first or up front. Ko or Iko coming from the word Iniko, family. Ko meaning people, Hukuiko. We are Tamalco. Tamalco is a branch of Hukuiko. We are from the village of Echacolom, which is right there across from the family that raised Theresa Harlan in of the Tamalco people, Tamal Liwa of Tamal Huya, Point Reyes. Tamal Huya, Point Reyes. Kulipi Huya, the North Point. The lighthouse, Omata Huya. Marshall Echa Colom. 13,000 years, indigenous knowledge. We have a very strong relationship with the land, with fire. It's part of our creation story. Coyote sent the hummingbird up to the sun to grab fire and brought it back and gave some to the people and kept some for himself. And a little event that happened, hummingbird wanted to get some fire after coyotes playing around and let his fire go out. He told hummingbird to go get some fire from the humans. And in this event, careless Kulipi hummingbird let some sparks fly around and caught the forest on fire and burned everything up. And a lesson to be learned in this from the people was what the fire had done to the land and the restoration that took place after. And, you know, metaphorical stories and morals and values in these stories and lessons to be learned in building this relationship and living with the land in that way, understanding that if we didn't do this, that natural events were going to happen and be catastrophic. But as you see behind me there, the tule elk, they need that grass to grow. And you see those big rolling hills in the background there that my ancestors created from burning the evergreen forest The evergreen forest creates orange soil, acidic, rich iron soils. We have these beautiful open rolling hills that once had giant oak trees on them that were planted by my people. We would burn the forest and create that dark midden soil. Some of you environmentalists and scientists know what biochar does for soil. Well, in the indigenous practice, we burned the forest down and saw the results of this and understood that when we collected the acorns for food and collected the leaves and the dead branches and burned around them, they thrived. Now, what happened, Theresa spoke on that. You removed the people. The people were removed from the land. And the thought of our practices was not looked at, the reason why the landscape was the way it was. But when they came here, it was described as a beautiful park-like setting. So the removal of the people caused the harm on the land. And then we were taught fire is bad. And right now, we have the Coast Miwok Tribal Council of Marin. We are claiming the entire Marin County. It is the territory of the Hukuiko. Our ancestors, the Hukuiko, were asked to show where our borders were, from Bodega, east down to Petaluma, down through the bays, all the way around the tip near the Golden Gate, and back up was our territory. We had markers on these hilltops. When we met with the Southern Pomo, we knew to wait in certain areas. And I want to elaborate a little more on what I do personally for work. For one, we are homeless in our own land, so I do not get to live in Marin County. I live in Tuolumne County, where I work with 2 federally recognized tribes. And I do preservation work. I work in their cultural departments. I help do a lot of negotiations under AB 52 with the Forest Service, with CAL FIRE, with Caltrans, with PG&E. I was also involved with the Calaveras Band of Miwok, which is not a federally recognized tribe. Let me remind that there are no state recognized tribes in California. I think there might be not quite 70, high 60s throughout the entire United States, state recognized tribes, but not in California. Yet I work with a tribe who, these entities recognize them and they understand who they are. And I do this preservation work with them. We did a cultural burn up Highway 4 in Big Trees State Park with the giant redwoods. All indigenous knowledge was shared, working with the Park Service themselves, also working with the entities that were thinning the trees, cutting the brush, us guiding them, showing them the cultural practices. And then we I personally will do a hand drill and light that fire as our ancestors would do. Let's say when we would leave the place for the winter, light it and let it go. I speak in layman terms. A lot of this talking stuff with the public is new to me. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions for anybody the best I can. Let me talk a little more about the council real quick. We are the Coast Miwok Tribal Council. We are formed under Public Law 93638. This law says that a person who has their BIA certificate, let's say from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, recognizes you as a descendant, or through a CBID, certificate of Indian verification, there's many different types of certificates you get through the BIA, can form a group of people. This group of people has the right to form a council. This council has the right to form organizations, for-profit, non-profit. We do not have a chair on our board. We do not work like that. We are made up of headmen that represent different families and villages. Our Hukuiko Inc. is our nonprofit. We have a board. We have a chair, a vice chair, all that. We are currently working on membership, accepting applications from all of those who can show their Coast Miwok of Marin County descendancy. And we'll also be more than happy to work with any of you getting those documents, showing you how to get them. And then once we get our membership fully going and get enough, let's say, headmen to represent different areas. Now, once again, we go from Bodega. We're the entire Marin County. So we don't just have families from Tomales Bay. We have families that are also from Bodega Bay. We have families that are from different areas, from Olampali. Okay, so our goal is to restore these families back to claim their villages. And they can have their own headman, which will make up the agency of all of this. That's what the council is currently working on. I also do some other things outside of the council with the environment through Sea Salt, the Coho Salmon Land Trust of Marin, trying to save the salmon. That's also working with Turtle Island Restoration Network and Spawn. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. All right, this is our Q&A period. I have a few questions and answers. If you could spotlight both of our speakers, and we'll give them both a chance to answer these questions. My first question is, what could people here listening to you today do to support the land back and cultural preservation efforts that you're working on now and in the next period? So let's start with Theresa and then go to Jason.
Thank you. I was trying to follow the directions on the screen about unmuting. So what can others do to support the work that we're doing?
Yes, what could we do here to support the land back and cultural preservation work that you're doing?
Okay. So my thing is to have an open mind and to listen to the stories that we're sharing, listen to the information that we're sharing. And, you can visit our websites and get more information. You can make donations to our websites. But one of the things that I'll say is that, is really, I think, is understanding that what you may know about Point Reyes, the story behind it is not the full story. And so when you go to the park, remember that it's the home of our ancestors, and to visit there with respect. You live in Marin County, be respectful to our homelands. I'll let Jason.
Yeah. Well, what Theresa said, hear the people talk. I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for the council. You can check out our website, Coast Miwok of Marin.org. Right now, we are looking at purchasing land. We've raised about $500,000, pretty close, to purchase a 26-acre parcel in our homeland, buying our land back in Nicasio, Rancho Nicasio, which we once had 80,000 acres during the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, before California was handed over to the U.S. when it was Mexico. We had 80,000 acres. That was just one area. That was Echa Tomol. Echa mean behind, Tomol, mountain, or bay, behind the bay. The real name of Nicasio. It's kind of weird. One of our old headmen, we don't say chiefs. We don't have a one person that speaks for all. We have many headmen and chiefs. And one of our people, Chief Nicasio, they called him, he had to raise his own money to buy a 20-something acre parcel. Just happens to be right across the street from where we're looking at this land right now. And so here we are raising our own money, trying to do this right now. If anyone's interested in helping us, once again, coastmiwokofmarin.org. You can look at the bottom of our page. It says donate. You just click the donate and it'll bring you to a separate page. We have a wonderful ally working with us right now, Nancy Benzin, who is helping us handle the donations. It has her website there and all the different ways you can donate, even direct depositing to our account. Check out our website. There's a lot of us that are left out, and we want to bring people home. This 30 acres that we're looking at is not for us to live personally. It's not for us to build homes. It's not. Hopefully one day we can return home. But for now, it's to bring the culture back. We want to build a living cultural center. We want to provide a place to invite the community to share certain things, Indigenous practices, have demonstrations, what is appropriate, culturally appropriate, without exploiting some of our private ceremonies and things like that, but still have a place that we can share with the public on these environmental and, climate issues. For instance, some of the things we can share.
Jason, just a quick follow-up on this. I understand that there's a fundraising goal and a fundraising deadline for this particular land purchase. Could you tell us more about that?
I'm not sure when the deadline is. I know that people just don't want to give land back. They want some money. Okay, so they have a couple people looking at it, and they're trying to make the right, figure out who's the right. Well, of course, we're the original stewards of the land. And it just sucks that money's an issue. But just this year alone, we've in just a few months, we've raised about $475. We need 1.2. They do want to sell it soon. I'm not sure when the deadline is.
Yeah, I think Carol was saying it might be the end of June. So it is a time-sensitive fundraise, and this will be the first land back for the tribal council. Am I right?
Yes, in Marin, yes.
Right.
Without the parks being involved, a place we can build a ceremonial roundhouse and bring all those families back that used to be there back in the 90s. I still travel with a lot of them personally. I still keep those connections. And we just did our first powwow working with the Marin American Indian Alliance over at Miller Creek Elementary School. And we've seen how the community really wants that. And yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. We have a couple more questions. One question that came in from the audience was asking about the relationship between your organizations, the Alliance of Felix Cove, the Coast Miwok Tribal Council, and they also mentioned the Marin Coast Miwok. And how do you work together and like that? So Theresa, I'll start with you.
Thanks. So, we're our own organizations, but we definitely work together, meaning that at our Tule Canoe events and launches, we invite Coast Miwok Tribal Council Marin. Dean Hoagland opened our workshop series. And so, we recognize Coast Miwok Tribal Council Marin as relatives because we all come from close to the same people and have the same interests of bringing community back and reconnecting. And the other group, Coast Miwok of Marin, I've been on some of Lucina's webinars and her work to launch I think it's a statue. But we each have our own way of reaching similar goals.
Jason, anything to add?
Yeah, this is a hard one for me because I mentioned how our council was formed. And I've worked with Miwok of Marin, with Lucina Vidari, and she was part of our group when we first formed, but unfortunately, you got to have your BIA documents, and just wasn't able to provide those. As far as her statue, we've been involved with her, making sure it was culturally appropriate, representing what we feel is what our ancestors look like. She chose to pick a male dancer. So we worked with some people through historical drawings of Mission Dolores, what this would look like. And we left it up to her. That's her idea. So we totally support her with that. We support Theresa with building our Tule boats, which my cousin and I, Tashina Parker, who is a granddaughter of one of our relatives who came from Marshall, who was adopted and raised in Yosemite after boarding school. And so we have some family in the Yosemite area. Her and I were able to ride this beautiful Tule boat that Ed and Theresa and the group had built and paddle around in the bay. And so we attend each other's events. We would love to be all one group. I'm not sure why we're not. But anyways, that's how we feel. Our arms and our doors are open to all who want to join and be a part of our group. We need to get our certificates and show our ancestry and make sure we have all our proper documents in place to do that. And we will be more than happy to help anybody do that. And that's what we can do currently to help support any Coast Miwok of Marin.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Okay, the next question. Have there been efforts to return land from national parks that you're aware of, or does your campaign involve that? And where have they been successful and where could you use a hand? Theresa.
I'm not aware of land going back from a national park. What I am aware of is that, the 1.5 acres at Kuliloklo at Point Reyes National Seashore, I'm aware of, maybe Jason knows more about this, the building of the Sierra Miwok village at Yosemite, at Yellowstone. At the 150th anniversary, there's a cultural center that represents the Indigenous people who have ancestral ties to Yellowstone. We are interested in actually gaining access to our family cove and our family home. We've been talking to the superintendent, Craig Kinkle, about how we can make that happen. We would love to establish an agreement with the national park where we could do exactly that and then raise funds for the restoration of our home, for the creation of a historical, a living history center and ecological garden. We would love to build a place in which people can come to Point Reyes National Seashore and see what it means to put Indigenous living systems in place. When you walk down now, the hazelnut trees are just suffering. The strawberries are not fruiting. It's overgrown with eucalyptus. It's untended. And we would love the opportunity to tend it and take care of it and host family gatherings and put up history and stories about the family. We've been trying to get meetings with Representative Huffman, and we've not been successful with that. So folks who have affiliation with his office, ask him. Take a meeting with Theresa, take a meeting with the Alliance for Felix Cove. If you have associations at the federal level with Director Sams and Deb Harlan, we need leverage. We need help with leveraging so that we can access our home. And so we might be creating something that, doesn't exist yet, but we're all ready to do it. There's no reason why not.
Just to give a time check, we have about 3 minutes left. So, Jason, anything you want to say about that, but also maybe like a minute final word for the group? And before you answer, I just want to let everyone here know that some of us will be staying at the end after 7, and we're going to do small group hangout for anyone else who wants to kind of hang out and chat and process what they've learned and think about next steps.
Sure.
So go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, just to add real quick, with a lot of what Theresa was saying, just a reminder real quick, there are many tribes in California, not all are federally recognized. There are no state recognized tribes in California, yet the tribes of Yosemite are not federally recognized. Yet the park understands who they are, and they've dedicated a place outside of the museum area, a private place that I'm involved with the tribe over there, that we can have private ceremonies once again.
Great,
that's what needs to take place.
Theresa, any final words of closing before we close?
Take a walk down to the Cove and see it for yourself and experience it. And go to our website. We have lots of stories and resources, articles, podcasts, videos. Get to know us, reach out to us. Happy to talk with folks offline.
Great. Well, thank you to both of you, Theresa and Jason, for taking the time to speak with us today, for giving us a chance to get to know you and your organizations and the work that you're doing around cultural preservation and land back. Thank you to everyone who has had interest and were able to participate today. We hope you enjoyed our programming. We have more Indigenous Voices Speakers series programs that we're planning for 2023. So if you'd like to stay up to date on the work we're doing, please join our climate justice team. and join our chapter, because then you'll get on our mailing list and you'll get information about our programs. Do what you can to support the work that both Jason and Theresa are doing in their organizations. Think about land back. Think about what are those next questions that we should be thinking about as settlers to support and uplift the voices of Indigenous people in our local Bay Area. Anybody who wants to stay will stay and do a hangout and maybe breakout rooms depending on how many there are. And thank you everyone for coming. Kamsahamnida.